Hello, selectors, and welcome back to the Left Brace Podcast. We're talking about the Dissonance Diva centers here and what we can do with them prior to Set 13 coming out. Set 13 is going to make this deck way more useful, which is way better in general. But until then, we've got some pretty powerful cards we can still play with, but a little awkwardness. This is the deck I'm actually most excited about playing, and where I'm going to do with my starting line here. Basically, I've just finally decided. Guys, you have no clue how many sleepless nights I was having thinking about this matchup or what this was going to do. Because I really like Mikomiko here. It's got a lot of things going for it. Most notably, she's got bat wings and a maid outfit, and she's got a witch's broom, and all those things are things I like. So. She's also very strong, I think, too. But outside of that, I think it's important to talk about her. I don't think... Oh, the tokens are here. I actually can go... Look at this. Dexys has got everything, guys. I didn't do this in my last one, but I should have done it in my last one. Good job, Dexys. Good job, Hellfire. This site is awesome. So it's in Japanese, but we get a sneak peek looking at it through the Dexys side. Let's talk about Mikomiko. Personally, this is my starting line for what I'm going to be doing with the next set coming up. And I'm going to try to upgrade this as much as possible as my main deck, probably. Mostly because of flavor, but also because of power as well. Mikomiko 3/3 mix control is basically... The idea is basically to try to use the center as powerfully as possible. And does have one glaring weakness that I think gets fixed in set 13, but in the meantime, I think it actually has quite a lot going for it. The card itself allows you to ring at the beginning of your attack phase if there are 2 or more Disona on your field, and that's a very important 2 or more. Does not have to be all 3. You get to choose one. The opponent either discards a card from their hand, or your opponent can't draw more than 1 card during their next draw phase unless they pay 1 enter. Basically, the way that's going to break down is you're probably always going to make them discard a card from their hand, but should you need to, if they're out of cards in the hand, which is a realistic possibility, usually that's where discard decks end and basically have nothing else. That's also one way you can play against them, is sort of just have no hand and just aggro them down. This then starts making them taxed for that kind of thing too. And it also, the tax gets worse because of the partner signy. Its enter ability is draw 2 cards unless your opponent discards 2 cards from their hand. It's almost always going to be draw 2 for you, which actually is beneficial to this deck, I think, because this deck's, one of its weaknesses, I think, is drawing cards. Currently, it gets fixed in set 13, but right now, drawing cards is kind of a weakness for it. So I think you'll end up drawing 2 more than anything else, but occasionally your opponent will do the work for you. You can put less effort in discarding them down. Its action once per game effect basically is target one signy on the opponent's field to put it in the bottom of the owner's deck, unless the opponent pays 4. That's kind of an awkward ability sometimes, given discard decks also want to vanish things on the field. But there are ways around sort of vanishing things on the field, plus the tax will add up, plus the partner signy will help with that. So you're going to find that most times when you are doing this correctly, your opponent's not going to be able to pay 4, and then you'll be able to put something on the bottom. I think this is one of those ones where you probably use to pretty much turn 3 immediately, because the opponent will be shy on enter there at that point, and then later down the line, you can start attacking their signies, which will give them enter for sure. But it is, I think, better earlier in the game, whereas sort of Madoka, which I think is the foil of, is Madoka was probably a better to wait on it a little bit. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. I have to kind of play it in order to find out. As soon as I read the what this does and its partner signy, I think it's always important to look at the partner signy before looking at the rest of the deck anyways. This is Miko Oshi, which is a level 3 green or level 3 blue signy, 10,000 power. It's got the ability of auto at the beginning of your attack phase. If there's a Mikomiko on your field, the opponent gets 1 Mikomiko bodyguard, which is a token. You'll see it in a second. When the signy attacks, choose one. Your opponent either discards 1 card from their hand, or if there's at least 3 cards in your hand, more cards in your hand than the opponent's hand, this signy can get shadow signy until the end of your opponent's turn, which means that it gets it like upon attacking, which is kind of cool. So theoretically can't get life bursted afterwards, which is strong. Um, and also can't be like, I don't know, punished by Signy's getting vanished. I don't know. There's a bunch of things why that could be pretty good. Plus, it ends up being a wall for yourself. Walls are very good in control decks in general. I don't need to explain that. I don't think. Its life burst is you can target one Elrig on your opponent's field and freeze it. That doesn't down it, which is kind of disappointing, but freezing it usually is good enough to save 1 damage, right? They'll either not attack with it and to attack with maybe a double attack later, which saves you 1 damage, or they'll attack with it and it saves you on 1 future damage. Sometimes you hit that and you're like, okay, cool, I don't have to get the guard back either, so that kind of helps you relax a little bit in what you're doing. When you're playing Mikomiko, clearly you're going to be playing that. You're going to also be playing these Mikomiko bodyguards. There's 2 different versions of them. There's one with hearts in it, and then there's one who's just very excited. They have the same effect, though, which is that you give it to your opponent so they own this effect, and this effect then says at the end of your turn, discard 1 card from your hand. If you do, you can remove this token, which means that if the opponent has no cards at the end of their hand, or at the end of the turn, these just add up, right? And then basically your opponent never plays with cards in their hand, which means that you're pretty efficiently stripping guards from them, I think. More or less, once I've read all those effects for Mikomiko, I had to make a decision as to what's the type of deck I want to play. And where I ended up pretty quickly is I wanted to play X and I wanted to play Yuka. I think these are just the natural inclusions. I'm sure there's a bunch of other things that you could play with these, but specifically my reasoning for wanting to play with this is X has a very strong ability to basically just replace Madoka Float, and I do think Madoka Float is probably the most powerful level 1 in the game right now. I'm even including Machina in that front. So replacing that with more or less the equivalent of it is very, very, very strong. I also, again, like I said, the weakness of this deck, I think, is it doesn't draw a ton of cards, which is why I wanted Yuka Pawn. Since I'm not going to be doubling down on two blue center, two blue assists, right? One assist, 1 center. I want to run a Dream Team piece. I think that's actually pretty important. I have to kind of then go with white as being my other option for reasons. But it's mostly for Dijon. Dijon has a really, really weak effect where it's got the ability to tax your opponent 1 enter or 1 card. This deck really needs those taxes to kick in order for them to work, which is why X Crossfire also works. Is we're going to be entering a world where once we break the color rule, there's a lot more enter burn that says that don't share a color with your opponent's Elrig and put it into the trash, right? There's going to be a lot of those running around in the future, and so X Crossfire just becomes significantly better. Enter burning your opponent for 2, maybe even 3 with the Yuka is very strong into getting your once per game ability off. Maybe not immediately, maybe later down in the middle of the game, which I think is quite strong. You can also pair it with Go to the Top, which I think is very, very good, is specifically in a control deck, because it's got the ability to, of course, get rid of 3 enter, which I think is great, right? You're going to be attacking them, giving them that enter probably because you're also, discarding the cards from their hand, so you want to empty their hand, in a way to efficiently do that is also get rid of the things on their field, so it forces them to play it. Go to the Top helps out with that, for sure. But the other thing that it really helps out with, and this is kind of unique in Wixoss, is it gets a card from your deck and puts it into your hand. It's a tutor effect. And the deck could really function getting some tutor effects. Like, one of the ways that Control struggles is especially against other control decks, for example, is they just don't have the right card at the right time. They're spread too thin. They're constantly always being like, well, I need to counter mono white by doing these effects, and I need to counter red aggro by doing these things, and I would really like to counter the Esper decks by doing these things. So being able to specifically fish whatever card you need to counter that, especially because these control decks usually run one-ofs, or is pretty important, I think. The other one that I'm running is Colorful Ensemble. I think this changes to whatever that other card is in set 13 that's coming out that allows, it's the Disona piece that's also blue. I think that card is insane. and really, really, really help solidify the deck. But until then, you don't have that. You got to use something else. And I actually like in Colorful Ensemble a little bit. Freezes your opponent Elrig, which is nice with your which is nice with in paired with your partner Signy, right? The partner Signy Life Burst can freeze the Elrig. Maybe you can get 2 turns out of it, not being able to up, which is very strong. But getting Assassin is really good, and getting a Bounce is really good, because that all adds to the taxing effects too. Basically, not allowing your opponent to have enter. Assassin's really, really, really strong in taxing decks too. It's just not really utilized because there's just not the blue, white, red wedge of Wixoss is that taxing effect, enter burning, enter denying, discard, right? But there hasn't really been a deck that's been able to put all of those in together. This actually is a great enter denial piece because of that. Then let's move right along into the actual main deck itself here. So the first thing that I did basically this deck before I put any of the rest of it together was find 10 red cards. With X Echo, right? You need to discard a red card. So you want to discard certain red cards. And I think you're very rarely wanting to discard these, but you want a fair amount of red cards that are later game cards. So that way you're like, yeah, I'm willing to discard one of those. And those end up being the Park Openings, the Lalaroos, and however I pronounce this one, Anois. These guys end up being your red fodder that you can discard pretty easily. The amount to get X Echo working of red is around 10 to 12. So I'm lowballing it here with 10. This is just a card that pumps a Disona on the field, so you can get it out of certain ranges when you attack, and you can attack down an empty lane efficiently and not get Mocking it out. This Enderburns, there's actually a fair amount of spells in this deck. There's 6. So this Enderburns the opponent. That's pretty good. It's actually not terrible here. Being 5,000 powers, not great. But you know, you'll take it. You'll take it. It's got a good life burst. So you can discard a card to make the opponent open up a lane on the opponent. Firecracker is the most insane card coming out of Disona. Being able to discard a card at level 1 doing Vanish 5,000 or less is very, very strong. Opens up a ton of new possibilities, especially with this deck now being able to have the ability to basically turn on the aggro or turn on the defense is sort of one of those hallmarks of a control deck that I'm really looking to do, or just a deck in general that I personally want to play, really looking to do. And then Park Opening is your spell. It basically says open a lane for one red enter. It's specifically you have to target a Disona, and then when it attacks, you can vanish something 10,000 or lower, which is a lot of things, you know. Has an okay life burst. So that's your red. Like this is the red that this is probably the thing that I spent the longest on trying to figure out. As soon as I was able to come up with this balance of red, shouts out to Pigeon for basically telling me to use this card, even though neither one of us, I think, like it all that much. It opened up a lot of things. One of the reasons I'm also using this is because I also upped the amount of werewolves that I'm running. Werewolves are level 1s that do the lane opening abilities as well. They cost 1 Disona from your enter, and then it gets the following ability, which is that as long as there's a level 1 in front of it, it gets Lancer. Being able to make this 5k plus its 3k, so 8k, means that you're vanishing basically any level 1, even the wall level 1s that are in front of it. So I really like this combo, even though it's not like something I'm actively looking to do. Firecracker we already talked about being just absurd with being able to open up lanes for us. And then Pond Turtle, I believe, is is the English name of it, Pond Turtle. This has a cool one where it is 5,000 power, basically, as long as you have more cards than the opponent, which theoretically you should all the time. But other than that, it's basically Monoman. You have to discard Disona, so it's not exactly Monoman. You can't discard a guard to it, although you're crazy if you're discarding a guard to it. And it also can't discard my 2 Exias. That's right. They're in there. This isn't complete Disonas. I think there's wiggle room probably to cut some more of these Disonas down. Probably anywhere from 2 to 3. 3 if you're really ballsy. And put in some more cards that aren't Disonas. And I do like that. Like, for example, Yuki would be cool to add. Cetaclith, whatever its name is, would also be pretty cool to add. There's some white walls that would be pretty cool to add. I'm not fond of Remember in this type of deck build, but theoretically, Remember could also be a cool one to add. So there's some power cards in here that you theoretically could cut and add. Right now, I like this. Yeah, maybe even ZR if you want to go crazy. You could do the ZR. No, you couldn't, because we don't have. That's right. Color breaks are confusing me. It's a new world. You don't have the blackout rig to do with that color break. But yeah, as I'm just saying, as a rule of thumb, you can break Disona a little bit in any of the ones specifically that say. I put it out here. The beginning of your attack phase, as long as you have 2 or more Disona, so you can occasionally break those a little bit. And I want Exias. I'm not ready to give up Exia. Exia by far was the best card at the GP for me. I think it still is the best card in Wixoss, even with all these Disonas coming out. I think these Disonas that make Exia better, because a lot of them target and open lanes. So if I'm going to make a choice here, I'm going to want to have a couple Exias. I would like to have 3 Exias in the deck if I could help it, but I just need more blue and I need more red. Maybe in set 13, I would probably end up going to 3 Exias, but right now, I'm happy with my 2. Those are level 1 slots in the deck outside of guards. You also play guards. Those are good. They're not Disonas. That sucks. But, hey, they're guards. Moving on into level 2s, we talked about, Lalaru being a very good card in this type of deck, especially because I do have 6 spells here. I purposefully did that. I went down on extras at one point to 3 or even 2. And then immediately went back up because I was like, I can't justify the Lalaru unless I have enough spells in here. And those are fine cards, but the other thing to make up for it also is Ivy. I think the deck is a little enter hungry, especially because this costs 2, this costs 3. This should cost 1. I'm hoping it only costs 1, and then I should be good on costs from then on. But sometimes your opponents play around this and it costs 3 and it sucks. So you have some enter costs that you're going to be doing, not to mention some of your main deck stuff like your werewolves and your other effects, like you're going to be playing for these spells to cost enter. So I like having some amount of Ivy in there, and Ivy just enter charges you. And my reasoning being is between 3 Ivy and 3 Werewolf. That puts me at 6 green, and then plus 2 Bang puts me at 10 green, which means that my Green Splash is real. It's a real card here. And I really, really like Bang. I mean, if you know me, if you've been following the channel, I just like Bang in general. She's my favorite. She's literally my favorite Elrig. But outside of that, I think it's actually very strong to have a Elrig that can be 15k. I think that's really good. It kills things very cleanly, and I think that's really important. And then it also has Shadow level 3 or higher, which isn't always the best in this deck. I mean, I guess it has Shadow level 3 or higher, which means it actually has Shadow from Elrigs as well, like the center Elrigs. But its main thing is its once per turn effect, which allows you to just have the opponent put a Signet in their enter, right? Cleanly gets around Exia, which I think is really, really good. I think it's probably one of the best things that you can be doing at the top end moving forward. So I think it's just a very clean. It gets around Shadow, gets around a lot of that kind of stuff. So I think it's you can also, like, if something has Shadow, right, you can probably kill around it with these effects, right? And then you can go ahead and play your Bang at the end there to deal with the other thing. I think it's good. I think it's good. I would say I think it's good. I think it's more proactive than I think control strategies normally are. I don't think it's bad. I think you're actually supposed to be in that kind of world too. The extras, they're just random drains, right? They're just random drains with extra text. That's probably why they're called extra. It's just they've got extra text. They're just random drains. It's got, I think, maybe a better life burst than random drain. Random drain down and freezes a Signy, which is good. This doesn't down and freeze. It down targets Elrig and you disable it, so you basically save a damage from an Elrig. I don't know if that's better. It's definitely better in the Esper matchups, but the downing and freezing at Signy is significantly better in these aggro matchups, which I think you can still get aggroed to down in this deck, which is probably why you want to put the clock on a little bit. Basically, I think that's also why outside of these 2 cards which deal with Elrigs, with Life Burst. I mean, and I guess this one too, because it gets you guards back. I need everything else to hit Signy. I just do, right? This hits Signy, this hits Signy, this hits Signy, this hits Signy. I think that's important, and maybe even a weakness of this deck is that its Elrig's or its Life Burst doesn't necessarily help you hit Signy. Hopefully, the early game can be dominated by this type of effects, so that'll help you out. And that's also one of the reasons why I've got Xyz in here. I think it's quite important. To round off our level 3s, though, we've got 2 cards we didn't talk about, which is Alos. This is a Signy that just helps make the opponent discard cards at random. Discarding cards at random is excellent. It basically always strips out a guard, especially if you're very good at limiting the opponent's hand, right? If the opponent has 5 in hand, you manage it to go down to 2. Getting a discard at random is 50-50 shot at now killing the guard. It's fantastic. And it also does the you can pay and enter and give something negative 3,000 in this deck, which is also fantastic. It's great, So I think this card is excellent. It basically replaces ZR in the normal control build. It's not quite as flexible as ZR, which is a downside, but it does have the Disona tag on it, which makes it, probably maybe better. The other one that I've got in this is a pigeon suggestion for me is to put into Tamago. I originally had 0 Tamago, but the deck loses cards out of its hand very frequently from all of its effects. So refreshing some cards in your hand is pretty good. If you're going to open up lanes, I mean, you might as well put some card put back in there. Pigeon said, in the interview I did recently for him with winning the GP, that he really, 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 really loved playing, especially when it comes to freezing Elrigs, right, which this deck can do. You get a turn off where you don't need to guard, and during that turn off that you don't need to guard, you can use that for Firefly Squid. In this case, it would be Tamago, to gain cards in hand, and then that allows you the freedom to then make better plays later down the line. So I trust this opinion. It seems like it's a good move. Plus, how am I supposed to say no to Tamago? I love Tamago. My only regret, I don't have any Novas in here, so I can't complete the trifecta. But yeah, I'm really confident in this deck. Actually, very confident in this deck. I think this is going to be my main thing I'm testing for quite a while. If you guys test it out, let me know how you guys do with it.